Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today, it's Ask Me Almost Anything. My name is Glenn Gers. I have been a professional screenwriter in movies and TV for 25 years, and now I am writing for screens here on YouTube to try and help out anybody who is interested in learning about screenwriting and give you what I know in case it's of use. I am here pretty much every Monday through Friday, if I can make it, at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I also can be reached if you are not watching live and you would like to ask me a question. You can just go to writingforscreens.com. That is my website, where you can click the Contact Me button, and it will open up a little window that lets you write me an email that goes direct to me, and I will reply by email. If for some reason you hate websites and you want to stay on YouTube, which is a website, by the way, you can just ask me a question in the comments of this very video or any video on my channel. That will also go indirectly through YouTube to me, and I will try and answer you there. Hello, Kirby Light. Hello, Ellen. Hello, this is Gitchy. People are piling in now. Today, we are doing a bit of, hello, Mally. A bit of Ask Me Anything. I got a pile of questions that have come in over the past weeks, and I'm going to attend to them, plus anything that comes at me here if I can. Larry, TFVWXX. Hello. Hey. It's funny how many people, when they create a screen name, do not necessarily think it's going to be read out loud. Hey, 99 Precinct, how are ya? Okay, so today it's, as I said, AMAA, Ask Me Almost Anything. And hello, Butte, Montana, I hope, but you never know. Could just be a butte. Our first question in the prepared questions section is, who asked this? Hang on just a second while I look this question up. Andrea said, I'd like you to cover adaptation sometime. It seems to me it's really a subtraction job. Besides having to handle things like thoughts and feelings and try to show them, you have to cut away whole sections of the novel you're adapting if you want to squeeze the story into a feature film. So that's Andrea's question, and it's a good one for a couple of reasons. So I'd like to talk about a couple of layers of the adaptation process. The first thing I want to get to is what you're adapting. I want to be sure that you have the rights. Do not adapt a copyrighted work without a written legal agreement. I'm going to repeat that. Do not adapt a copyrighted work without a written legal agreement. And that agreement, by the way, should give you permission to do that. Don't just get I've got a written legal agreement here. It's my rent, yes, your car lease contract. That doesn't do it. You have to have the rights to the work, because many people believe either, I won't get caught, or more important, they say, I bet when they see my adaptation, they will agree to give me the rights. In other words, I will prove myself through my work. And here is the problem with that. You may be a phenomenal writer and your work may be the best adaptation possible. They still may not give you the rights because it is bad business. Because your adaptation, you are assuming you are not represented by an agent, in which case you should talk to your agent about this. You are a nobody. You are outside the business. And the people who grant the rights are the agent of the person who owns that property. They may ask them, but they're going to strongly advise them, do not give the rights to someone who does not give you tons of money, because they are always thinking the rights are valuable, more valuable than they probably are. So the person who owns the rights, their representative, is saying, if we give away these rights now to this person who has a great script but no connections, what happens if next week Sony Pictures comes along and they want it, but you've already signed a 18-month agreement to give the rights to this other person? That could screw up our whole great deal with Sony Pictures. So therefore, they will not give you the rights. Just a note. So that's the first thing, the legal end of adapting, which is only do it if you actually can get a written contract that says you have the rights for a certain amount of time for your payment of $10 or whatever it is to hold the rights. It's called an option. And with that, you have the right to do this. The problem is, there's a lot of work. Sorry, that's not the problem. The solution is, if you want to adapt something that is not copyright. There are tons of things that are in the public domain. And frankly, really cool material exists in everything except the past 75 years, which is when copyright runs. Anything before then, anything before about 1925 is going to be out of copyright. And those stories are really cool to adapt because they are very different. The world that they are from is very different. And so you get to really be creative, and you usually can find a story that nobody's ever heard of. And you're like, holy crap, I can't believe this clever novel from 1922, with a great story hook, a great twist, some trick, but nobody's ever heard of it. And all of a sudden you've got yourself a ready-made story. So that is good. What about a true story that hasn't been told? Here's the trick about a true story. This is a legal question that a lawyer should answer. The answer is, there are laws which prevent you from taking someone's life rights. They have the right to their own life if they are not a public figure. If someone is a public, the Queen of England probably could not sue you for life rights. They're a public figure. There's multiple sources of information about them that are public. Then you can write it if you do not use a specific source about them. Suppose you adapt a true story of somebody you know. Talk to a lawyer, get their life rights. The answer is, true stories generally, if they are news, if they are public, you can, in theory, write about them, but you generally do need the life rights. Yes, a whole bunch of cool stuff from, it was 1925, Great Gatsby, and that's the marker. And it was about a year ago that kicked in. Yeah, it's really freaky that's public domain now. Okay, so anyway, let's get past the legal crap and into the creative side of adapting, because that really was Andrea's question. And the answer is, essentially, you are following the same screenwriting process. Whatever your process is, I personally try to use my process of an outline. I really, really strongly advise you to outline, especially when you are working from a book, or I have adapted, actually, I adapted a TV movie into a movie. It was a British TV movie called Hot Money. It was very good. And then I adapted it into a movie called Mad Money. I changed, that was my change, hot to mad. Anyway, the first thing that I would suggest you do, aside from reading or absorbing the material several times, just to read through it once or twice, watch it 20 times, get it into your head so that you know it really, really well. The next thing I would do is, I personally would write an outline of it. Take the outline format that we've been working through, that I've put up in my how to, I believe, let's see if I got this here. How to outline. Do I got it? I don't got it. No. All right. Why outline and how to outline. I talk about this in videos. Anyway, make an outline of the book or the movie. Break down scene by scene what happens. what information they are giving when. Now, if you're doing a book, that outline is going to be huge, but it's a really great way because now you've got your raw material in a workable sense to say, okay, this is too many scenes. Let me make a copy of this and then start to cut, combine, do whatever you can. You've transformed it from this experience as an audience into a working experience, something that you can do. You can cut, you can move, you can think about what the value is of this scene or that scene. You can begin to think of it as a story. That's my first tip for adaptation. No matter what it is, turn it into an outline. William Goldman famously said he read through the book 3 times with 3 different highlighters. And he highlighted stuff each time he wrote it. And if something was getting multiple highlights, that was a clear indication that it was worth keeping. That's a good way to do it. I would still eventually get to write an outline of your material and start to think of it as your story, not as the story that existed up to now, because you're going to have needs and opinions that are different from the original. You're going to have to start to, and then once it's in outline form, you're going to have to start to ask all the same questions you would ask of any story. What's it about? Who's it about? What are they trying to do? Why can't they do it? What am I trying to tell the audience at the end that will give this some coherence? There's so much that is not different. Once you have transformed the work into a form that abstracts it from their words, from their images, their scenes, whatever it is, you start to think of it in terms of the raw material that you would be working with if you were making up a story. If you were making up a story, you would say, I've got this character and they're in this place and they do this thing. Well, that's stuff you will have taken, instead of from your imagination, you'll have taken it from the original material. But once you do that, it becomes yours, your story that you have to tell the best you can. I once adapted a novel, and I loved this novel. It's called The Adventures of Jessie Dark, and it's a beautifully written, fantastic novel, which is relatively unknown. Actually, it's on my website, a link to buy the out-of-print book, and also my script. But it was told in many layers of time, but they were the novel is organized around 4 or 5 sections of time. And what I did was I took the last section and I broke it up among the other sections to weave it so that each one of those steps of their life getting up to that moment was woven as memory. So you can often change the structure because you can't usually follow exactly the work as it is. You look at No Country for Old Men, Coen Brothers, they pretty much like just cut and pasted some stuff out of the book and made it into a script and outline. Famously, John Huston claimed, although I don't know that he did the same thing with The Maltese Falcon. He literally had cut the book up in pieces and then had someone type it into script form and turn the dialogue into dialogue form. And then he started to edit, and then he said he had a script. It sounds a little mythy to me, but you never know. I will take a second to say thank you. This shirt allows me to be green screened out. If you want to remove this portion of your image, I suspect that you can do that on your computer. All right. So that's the main thing about adaptation. It's actually not that different once you have found a way to transform the raw material, the original, into your work, your workspace, your work process. If the way you work is that you sort of write out of your head and you just go impulsively, it's going to be hard to do an adaptation because you're working with someone else's raw material. The great thing to do is just start to look at whatever it is as raw material, as stuff. And you have to value the stuff and say, what's the priority here? What's the most important piece? What is the one thing I cannot not have in this story? What is it all building to? Who is the most important person in it? That's adaptation. Writing, it's all the same writing as far as I'm concerned. But the great thing about it is you've got a whole world already at your fingertips. You may find yourself doing more research. I once, this is true, I was hired to adapt the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the story of Moses, into a movie, which frankly was a really good script. It was racing against Ridley Scott's Moses movie, or was it Scott or Spielberg? Anyway, somebody made a Moses movie, and so we were trying to beat it, and we couldn't. But it was an interesting thing to take the Bible and have to adapt it, because first of all, there are certain large sections that are just not story. They are laws, they are philosophy, there are all sorts of things. So to find the story of Moses, and then the thing is, I then went to the library and found there's whole books on the biography of Moses, in which they mix archaeological data and the biblical references and try to create an understanding of what it was like to be an Egyptian prince and then an Israelite and all that stuff. So you can adapt anything. It's doable. All right. So what I would just say is, don't be afraid of adaptation. Just remember to turn it into the thing you do, which I highly recommend my personal outlining process because I think it works. All right. Let us move on to our next cue. Our next question. This is a big one, and it's a hard one. Okay. If I'm good at plot, how do I get better writing the dialogue, characters, and emotions? I'm going to read a little bit more out of this. Bill wrote me that he's a technical writer, writes technical reports, and but has worked in theater and did some other stuff. He said, my characters aren't terrible because they do arise naturally out of the plot, but they are flat, perhaps because they exist solely to carry the plot. My dialogue doesn't pop. It's not laden with insights in life in general and plot illuminations. My work seems to be shy on the personal, the emotional, the subjective. And he said something interesting here. Sometimes I feel like I should somehow find a way to tap into that subconscious world that people like Cormac McCarthy and Jack Grapes talk about. They say if you have an outline, you're sunk already. They seem to suggest the only way to write well is to enter a magical realm within, where the characters appear fully formed and reveal the whole story to you. Then it's just a matter of being there to take dictation. They don't say how to do that, though, Bill writes. So his question is, how can I, as a story architect, a plotter, get into the zone of script finishing, all those other elements? That's a great question. I'm going to just take a second here to say, answer this because it relates to this and the other. I tried writing a book once, gave up because my brain doesn't give me ideas chronologically. Well, A, a book doesn't have to be chronological, and B, the important thing to do is to remember that the story, the lives of the characters are chronological. The plot, the thing that you are writing, is your reorganization and choices from their story. So while your brain may not give you ideas chronologically, if you are outlining, as I strongly recommend, then you can put ideas into the outline when you get them and then chronologicalize them. You can put them in whatever order you need. So that's the value, frankly, of an outline. And the outline can be as full and rich and detailed and full of creative writing as you like, because you can always just take that and put it out into the text later. But while you're trying to figure out the story, working in the outline form lets you get what you get when you get it. Okay, so let us get back to Bill's question about imagining the characters, doing the dialogue. How do you get all that writing stuff, that the magical realm of imagination and creativity. It is doable. First of all, anybody who's writing is verging into this territory already. You are making up stuff. You are imagining. But you may be thinking analytically about it. So I would say the first thing to do is recognize that this is a skill that you're going to need to work on. It doesn't just come to you. The people who say, I can't outline, you ruin it, I have to just put myself into the frame of mind and write, they are very lucky. They are immensely talented, and they have a quick connection to their own imagination. That's marvelous. Not everyone has that, and it doesn't always work. For a lot of people, it's very hard to get that reliably every day when you need to write every day, when you need to get the thing done. So if you're just relying on the going into the magical realm of imagination as your only source of material, of your only process, you are really making yourself vulnerable to mysteries that you can't work with. You're just stuck. If it doesn't come, which it often doesn't, you get anxious, you get distracted, you get busy. I had to write as an office temp for 12 years. I had to write while I was at other people's desks doing other people's jobs and then sneak my writing in. It's not great for going into the magical realm and getting lost there. But I actually learned how to do it, which is why I'm saying it's a matter of practicing this skill, this process. And you do it in small steps. You don't say, well, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a novel as a way to learn how to do this. You write a scene, you write a moment, you write a paragraph. You do that every day for a few months, and it will become more familiar. And so the action, the process of imagining becomes familiar with small steps practice. I cannot emphasize this enough to anyone who is trying to do anything creatively, really. Practice the process in small steps. Okay, so, but what is this process that you are going to, Slimmy Jimmy, yes, ask it and I will get back to you. Okay, so what is the process of imagining? I would say the first step is that you need to think out the character. You have to be in the character's shoes for a moment. Or if not in the character's shoes, you have to be in the moment. You have to know the story, which is why it's very hard to write without plotting first, without outlining. If you know what the scenes are, if you know what the scene is about, then you can spend your time thinking, what does it mean to them? You have to know each character. Even if you're not writing from someone's point of view, you need to understand what they are feeling from their point of view. And what you're doing when you're writing a scene is actually jumping from person to person or from person to whatever else is going on as each one acts and reacts. In other words, if you have a scene where two people come into a room and they both want a bar of gold, and each one is thinking different thoughts about how to get it, about how important it is, about what they're willing to do, whatever it is, you have to know what they're thinking in order to decide how they act, what they say. That's the job, to say, I know what I think this story is about, but what do they think it's about in that moment? That is the key. Get in the moment. And when you do that, you only do one moment at a time. Hang on just a second, because I got this one here. Let me see if I can do this. I have a cool graphic here that says one at a time, but I'm not quite able at the moment to drag it in. There we go. Okay. One feeling, one want, one desire, one need at a time. This is really important. People in stories, and honestly, in a way in life, you only really are feeling one thing at a time. That thing may be a conflict. You may be saying, I feel a desperate need to kill that person to get that bar of gold, but I also feel a desperate fear that if I do that, I will be evil or that I will be punished. That is a conflicted feeling. One of those is going to be stronger than the other, honestly. But I think the way that you try to figure out what's going on with any character in a moment is to figure out which one you think, there isn't a right or wrong answer to this, which one you think, what one feeling, what one desire, what one plan is on their mind at any given moment. That can change in a scene. They can have dozens of different feelings in a scene, but at any given moment, they're thinking one thing more than the other. They're not only thinking one thing, but they are thinking one feeling, one desire at a time. And that is how you start to get into the moment. You think, what's that feeling? What are they feeling right now? What do they want right now? What are they afraid of right in this second? And that is how you start to imagine. You get into the moment. And then, frankly, I would suggest you do what actors have to do. You might study a bit about method acting. They start with, first of all, trying to connect to things they know. For instance, if the character is feeling anger, can you think about times you have been angry, what it felt like, what the symptoms were of being angry at that moment? Have you, and you begin to get connections to feelings. What you're really doing is just opening up that magical realm. There isn't a right answer. There isn't a wrong answer. You don't have to have been a murderer. You don't have to have been a cheater. Whatever the character is doing, you don't have to do that. But by opening up your imagination to the things you do know, you start to open that magical realm. And that is the point of getting in the moment, is that if you can think, okay, this person is in this room and they're looking at that bar of gold. What does the gold look like? What does the room feel like? What does the room smell like? And you begin to think, what are they thinking about that person? And you get all those things. You get very, very specific and detailed. And then the magic happens. You don't get the magic, you get the details, and the magic comes to you, because the magic truly is magical. Imagination, creativity, you cannot will it, you cannot control it. All you can do is find a process by which you easily access it. And that is definitely something that you get through practice. And then the other thing I would suggest is that you look at my video on brainstorming. Okay, because that is the process you are doing. You are going into a place where you are letting yourself just be free mentally on a specific topic. You're not just randomly thinking whatever you're thinking. You're thinking, what are the many, many thoughts I can feel about this moment? The other thing I would suggest is looking at my video, Building Character Arcs. It's another great one for those of you who have not watched it. Okay. All right. So that is what I believe is the basic process of imagining. Your version of it will be your own. But what I would suggest is whatever version it is, you'll get it by practicing it. You'll get it by doing it, just saying like, I'm just going to imagine this scene. I'm just going to let people talk this way. And don't judge yourself. Don't criticize yourself. Don't edit yourself at that moment. That's where the brainstorming comes in. You just let go a little. So that is my main suggestion on the question of, if you're a good plotter, if you're a good step back and see the big picture, but you're having trouble with your dialogue, your characters, and your emotions, those are the steps I would say are likely to get you into them. The other thing I would say is you have it in there. You are a human being. I guarantee somewhere in there, everybody has different proportions. Everyone has different access to their feelings and to their insight and to empathy and all those things, but everybody's got them. And everyone can get more comfortable with getting to them and putting them down creatively. That's a process. That's a skill, like learning to swim or learning to drive or something, or learning to walk. You know, we all learned, well, most of us learned to walk. And the walking is incredibly complicated. And if you're thinking about walking, it makes it actually hard to do. But once you have practiced that weird thing of throwing yourself forward from foot to foot for a while, you become confident in it. And that is the way that you access your emotional stories, your character arcs, your dialogue. All that stuff will come as best it will. Some people are better at walking than others, but everyone can do it if you just practice and get really comfortable with the process. Now I'm going to quickly go through a bunch of these questions here. Okay, so if you get the world, characters, and language in place, and it's super interesting, but you have to discover the plot and most importantly, find the protagonist. Okay, that is an interesting thing. Okay, well, if you're adapting the novels, that helps because you've got the stuff. But that's an interesting question. It is the opposite. What I would say is, once again, I'm full of great videos. Go to my other videos. The 6 essential questions. Let me see what I got here. Okay, first of all, you definitely want to go to this one. Okay. And then you definitely want to go to this one. And then you definitely want to go to these. I think they will help a lot. Oh, wait, this is another one. There's so much I've done here. Not the dialogue one. That's a mistake. Sorry. Clicked on the wrong thing there. Dramatic action is central to figuring out this stuff. And set pieces, too, actually. Boop. Okay, so I strongly recommend you go through my videos because I really cover this stuff a lot. What you're doing is you're looking at what's there and you're trying to decide what's most important to me. And the ending is going to be really crucial. Now, you do not need to only have one character, one main character. That is a rule, which is partly people being chicken shit and afraid to have more complicated stories. And if you look at great movies, you'll see so many that do not follow these rules. So just, it's not. If you have more than one main character, it adds complexity to the task of telling the story because you have to be sure to balance them so that you're not spending too much time with one or the other if they're both equally important. But it can be done. The main thing is a story will focus on a person or some people. And you've got to make those choices. You've got to say, okay, of all the people in this imagined world, this one is the most important to this story. Not to the world, just to this story. All right. So the thing that you're really getting to here is making choices. Where is this? Yeah. Okay. Writing, when it comes to figuring the plot, it's really a matter of making the choices. Of the people in your story, who's the main one? Who's taking the most action? Who's doing something that will decide the fate of the question of the story? Otherwise, to say how do you discover the plot is sort of too vague a question. And that's kind of what your problem is. You're not turning it into a specific question. You're not saying, who is my main character? What is the biggest event in this story? What is the story? What are they trying to accomplish that we are wondering? We are turning the pages to find out, will they or won't they survive? Will they or won't they meet and fall in love? Will they or won't they overcome the obstacles to their love? Whatever it is, there's a question that a story asks in the beginning. And the rest of the story is working past obstacles to resolve that question. That is the basics of plot. Slimmy Jimmy. started with a theme and story, and fleshed out an outline, then went to see if it was there through my story. But it wasn't. But I liked the midpoint a lot. If I tweak my theme to match, is that bad? Oh, okay, I got you. So what you're saying is you had a theme and you had a story, and you worked out the story to your satisfaction, but the theme didn't seem to be there. Is it bad to tweak your theme? No. This is that's okay. No, I got it. It's not a problem. This is a fair question and really important, actually. There is no right or wrong answer to creative work. It's not like you can't do something. You can only not do it if it's resulting in a unsatisfying or incomplete work. If you choose, you can choose to have no theme at all in your mind. People will probably try to interpret a theme, but you don't have to have it. If you find a theme in the choices you've made, that's your theme. If it's not the one you thought you were starting with, cool. Very often you'll say like, oh, I know this is, famously American Beauty, the movie written by Alan Ball. He had a very different ending in mind. Likewise, Chinatown, the famous mystery from the 70s. Very different endings, which were very different stories with very different meanings. Like they were sort of telling a different story. And when the work was worked through, they said, you know what? That ending is not right. It's not telling us the story that the story is telling. So we need to change it. In one case, killing Faye Dunaway, the character, not the actress. In American Beauty, cutting off the last... there was a section after the end of the movie in which you saw what had happened to the people. And it just became clear after, in the edit, apparently, that they didn't need it. That the moment that it ends on now was the ending. It was all you needed, and you didn't want to give it further judgments and issues by continuing. Likewise, famously, Fatal Attraction was a story that ended with her killing herself and framing him, and he goes to jail, and it's horrible. and they showed that to people, and they were like, well, this is not a fun movie. It is, however, a good movie. It's not that these are bad choices. It was just less popular and less satisfying to the studio. And so they said, what if we add this last section where after the fight that they have in the loft, she comes after them at home in their new country home. And in fact, spoilers, get ready. If you haven't watched Fatal Attraction, I'm not going to spoil it. You should watch Fatal Attraction. It's actually not a great script, but it is a great movie. Anyway, the point is the ending was very different. And what this really comes to is, once again, I cannot say this enough. Writing is making choices. And that includes making choices as you go along, which change your other choices. Very often, you don't know what the work is until you have done some of it. And then you discover in it something that's very, very powerful and says it the way you need to say it. You don't have to have a plan that you follow. You just have to have a plan that you work through, and you may change the plan as you go. As I've often said, the outline is not a set thing you follow. It's a thing you work through. If you watch my screenwriting step by step, you'll see I am constantly going back to change the outline or rethink the outline based on stuff that I've discovered as I am working. The outline is just a workplace, a way to think. And likewise, the story. It isn't done until it's done. You could discover at the last minute that somebody you thought was the villain was the hero. There's so much that is available to you that to worry about, is it okay to not stick to the theme you started with? I almost never stick to things I started with. Yes, I think this is true. People underestimate how many drafts you have to write just to get a readable first draft, or even just to understand what your own work is about. You start out thinking it's one thing, and then you learn what it is as you do it. Not because it's telling you. It's not like there's a finished thing out there that's going, I know what I am. It's that you figure it out as you work. You learn as you create. Okay. All right. 25 drafts and the theme has been the same. Now it's not. I'm wondering if, I would honestly say 25 drafts is a lot. You might want to just accept whatever it is, let it be, because that's hard. That's a lot of drafts. It's not impossible, but it could be that you are not comfortable just making your choice and saying that's what it is. If you've got something, you've got a pile of pieces or you've got a draft, one of the things I do is to say, what's the most important thing here? Like if I had to sacrifice everything else in this story, what would be the scene or the line or the character moment or the idea that I would rather throw the whole thing away than change? And you get one of those, and then you start to get a couple others, like these are really important. Slowly but surely, you get pieces that you're like, okay, these are the pieces I need to protect. Everything else has to be built to make those work. And everything else that gets in their way has to go. So start to think about what is the thing that's most important to you. And there could be 10 of them, and then write a priorities list of this is the most one, this is the second, third, fourth, whatever. Then look at that and say, that's my story, or that's my idea, or that's my character, or that's my joke. You could write a whole movie to get to one joke. Anyway. I personally would just on this one suggest do not put work above family. Figure out a way to do a little work, but do not sacrifice your life for your work. In the long run, that is very, very unlikely to create a long, productive work life. That's something to work out. But you don't want to say this one yes, this one no, or this one yes, this one no. If you can't, you got to find a way to do both, and the proportions will constantly be shifting. Okay. Is it bad if your character changes goals mid-script? Yes. Yes. I got to say that one's bad. Unless there is the thing that you can do is the discovery that the goal they thought they wanted is not in fact what they wanted. But in that case, somewhere in that beginning, you're going to plant the real one. What you don't want to do is have them honestly, truthfully want one thing, and then halfway through stop and honestly, truthfully want another thing with no connection between those two things. With one of them being the false god and one of them being the true, being the thing they discover as they go on. Very often, people start out thinking, I want to rob this, gold treasury, and then by the time they're done, I want to take this gold and give it to the people of the city. That's cool. That's not actually, that's a discovery of the true goal by following the false. That is a doable thing. Okay. Yes, this is true. Platform studios and producers do love a protagonist. It's probably not that hard to find a protagonist. I mean, you got one in there somewhere. And even if you wanted to have 4, or 5, depending on the length of your piece or the amount of intercutting you want to do, you can do it. If you have 50, that's a problem. But somewhere in there, there's someone, and you have to choose because you're the artist, and the audience is not just producers. The audience is saying, I am coming in assuming that someone is organizing this story to be meaningful and not to just jump around and tell me a lot of different things. If it is not impossible to tell a story which just jumps around and does a lot of different things, in that case, it's the story of the city, for example, or the story of the castle. That's doable. You just have to make that clear to the audience at the beginning so they don't get hooked on one thing and then find themselves disappointed. And yes, you still might have a hard time selling it to some producers. Others would be like, whoa, that's genius. Okay. One of the 6 questions is, what does the character want? Can the answer change over the course? Sure. Yes, the same thing. They can want something different, although almost always there will be some relationship and between the two, and very often that you'll find that one of them is a false goal, or a mistaken goal, or one that teaches them the second goal. Okay. Lost in a labyrinth. I have had to abandon scripts because I got lost in a labyrinth. I was wondering if you think writing a genre piece in a single location is a good, well, it's certainly a good exercise. It may not, I mean, you can get lost in a labyrinth in one room with 3 people. The labyrinth is in your head. I personally believe that outlining helps a lot, because when it comes down to it, an outline, you can say, like, realistically, a feature film is going to have 40 to 60 scenes, maybe 70, whatever. But there's going to be a limited number of scenes. And the way that you compress your labyrinth and work out your labyrinth is to say, whatever I'm doing has to get into that. And so write your outline. If it's 90 scenes, if it's 200 scenes, start to think, is this 2 stories? Which pieces can I skip, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Good. Thank you so much, Gene. I am so glad you are here. Okay. What I wanted to say, it actually says, no. All that matters is the end. You have to, it's like saying, like when a painter starts and they sketch something and the head's too big. They say, oh, the head's too big on that portrait. So they bring the head down. Nobody will ever know that the head was too big, so it's not weakened. The final head is the only one that matters. The final draft that people read is the only one. It's like either that works or it doesn't. But no one will be comparing it to your original idea. They don't know what they are. Yes, watch Altman films if you want to do ensemble, and if you do want to fight with the studio. Also, once again, the Love Actually, just one of the most brilliantly crafted ensemble films in which he said he was inspired, but he said, I want to do an Altman film, but he used the craft and requirements of a acceptable studio romantic comedy, and it's pretty damn brilliant. But yes, Altman films are great. One of my favorites actually is it's hard to find. Hold on, I'm typing it. Not that well known, this Altman film. It's called Brewster Mccloud. It is kind of a fairy tale by Robert Altman, about a boy who wants to fly in Dallas in the 1970s. And it's really funny, and it's really well crafted, and it's nuts. Okay. All right. Yes, this is a biggie. I urge you, when you finish a draft, when you finished a script or something, step away and work on something else for a while. Especially if you get stuck. If you really, really get stuck, put it aside, do another. When you have done the other, you will be able to see it with brand new eyes. The thing you don't want to do is the thing I did, which is, over the course of my career, I did this so often that I had this enormous pile of unfinished projects, and that's sort of a drag. So try not to do that, but I would suggest shifting projects is a really good way to cleanse your brain creatively. So very often I will work on something for like a week and then stop and work on something else for a week and then go back to the other one just to wash my brain. Will you try to get UPKP made? No, alas, I don't see any likelihood of that happening. I'm more or less retired at this point, and I am nobody's knocking down my door to finance things for tens of millions of dollars. So the odds are that UPKP is just, and that's frankly why I'm doing it here. If it was something I really was like counting on to get right and out to the market, first of all, that would add a year of work at the rate we're going. And second of all, I wouldn't be able to teach it at the same time I was trying to fret about the actual values of whether or not this is commercial. So I just said to myself, let's just not worry about that. Let's just do this for the fun of doing it. Okay. Okay, here's one. The entire story of It's a Wonderful Life. Okay, It's a Wonderful Life. The thing that George wants more than anything is to get out of that damn town. And they keep it going. They drag that out. But the whole point is that George is fully determined to do something which in the end is not the best answer. Thank you. And you are welcome. Hang in there. You can find it. You've got stuff. Use what you have. All right. Yes. This is true. Ice Storm is a phenomenal ensemble film. There's a lot of good ensemble films, truly. Also, honestly, disaster movies, the Poseidon Adventure, or some of the good disaster movies are great ensemble films. You've got to get these characters into their little, you got to get them out in very, very small beats, and you have to keep them advancing. It's cool. All right. We're going to start slowing down. No more questions now because I still have to get to the ones we've got here. It's important narrowing your scope. This is sort of the same question. And the answer is just try to write a priorities list. Like say, what if somebody, not held a gun to my head, but, held me down and said, what is the one most important thing in this story? What's the moment? What's the one you'd kill to keep? And then you start to build from there. You just want something to hang on to. Okay. All right. I'm going to do one more of my big questions here from the. Actually two. Very quickly. Do movies require... No, actually, you know what? I'm going to do this another time because I want to do this one, which is, what do you think your biggest success in screenwriting was, and how did you start and earn it? Okay, I'm not going to do how I started because that's too long a story, but I'm going to talk about what my biggest success is. And this is tricky. I have had success. I have had genuine success. I have been highly paid. I have worked with studios and stars, and I have worked on TV shows, and I have won awards. But you have to understand, in Hollywood, I'm nothing. I'm just a foot soldier. I am not important. Nobody is going to say, oh my gosh, Glenn Gers wants to have a meeting. That's not happening, which is really interesting because it's like saying, like, I want to be a politician, and you end up becoming a congressman. So you're one of 415, and honestly, no one will have heard of you. It's quite shocking when you think you're in the big leagues and you realize you're at the bottom of the big leagues, which is great. I am not complaining, but I always have a certain amount of satirical feeling when I talk about my successes. But truthfully, yes, I've had successes. And what's interesting about that, especially now, as I am at the end of my career and looking back on it, I'm not done writing. I'm probably going to write novels now. But what I find interesting is if somebody said, what's my biggest success? My biggest actual commercial success would be Fracture. The thriller that I wrote stars Anthony Hopkins, Ryan Gosling, an amazing cast, David Strathairn. They're just fabulous actors, great director, actually a remarkably good experience, but very difficult. But I wrote that movie. I mean, I was one of 6 writers, and a lot of the story elements were other people's. But most of that dialogue and the work of getting it through the system and constructing it, that's me. And I'm very proud of that. And it was a hell of a great experience. Mad Money was a blast to write. I really felt proud of a lot of that script. But in truth, I would say that my biggest success is actually this little indie movie I wrote and directed by myself. I ended up having to edit myself because the editor got pulled off to do a big paying job, which I totally respect. Yeah, it's called Disfigured. It's rentable on iTunes or Amazon. I made it myself. I paid for it myself out of the money I got from Fracture and Mad Money, actually. And to me, that one's the best. Even though it's cheap, there's no names in it at all, no famous people. It's out of focus a lot. The color correcting is iffy, but I have to tell you, it's what I consider my greatest success. It's really what I wanted it to be, and it feels magical to me. And about 40,000 people have seen it, all told. At least that was the last count I had on Netflix. It was actually on Netflix for a while, way back at the beginning of Netflix streaming. But anyway, the answer is, yeah, Disfigured, I would say, is my personal best accomplishment. And I am so proud of the work I did on Instant Mom, the sitcom that I was part-time on the staff on, and it was really a great experience. And if you wanted to look at my credits and say, like, what's the biggest credit, the best credit, those are all great. The one that actually matters the most to me is this DIY movie that I made by taking a year off. And it was the fourth DIY movie I made. I had made several that had not gone as well. So that's it. That's my best. I gotta go. And that's it. At the moment, I can't answer any more. We've been going for an hour. I am thrilled to have seen y'all, and go write something.